Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and we welcome Terri White back in today.
Yes, a friend, Terri White, is joining us again. She is the Oklahoma Director of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services for the state of Oklahoma. She's the commissioner, I should say, not director. She's going to come on and talk to us today about things that are going on. Just recently, of course, we heard about the terrible incident on the Texas Lone Star Community College campus. We, of course, know about Sandy Hook. We know about the shootings in Colorado, and it just seems like one incident after another with folks that apparently have some mental health very serious difficulties, and we're going to talk to her about that, plus what's going on in her office.
Absolutely. Terri White, today's guest on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
Well, prices at the pump are hitting new highs this week. In other news,
gasoline is expected to top $4 a gallon this week.
expect drivers seeing sticker shock at the pump.
OPEC has raised the price of oil again, and Wall Street worries.
Well, a full tank of gas is going to set drivers back.
Straight ahead, the latest news on
Meanwhile, gasoline is expected
I have a doctorate in American Indian Studies and Comparative Cultural and Literary Studies. I focus on Native American arts and especially representations of American Indians. My name is Tracy Morris, and I am an educator, a scholar, and a business owner, and I am Chickasaw. I'm extremely interested in how Natives have been represented in the media and how we represent ourselves in the media. We have a unique opportunity right now with broadband and with new media. It's an open playing field. I do believe that it gives us a power to represent ourselves and a power to change our own destiny. Anybody with a cell phone, with a good phone, and an idea and a computer can go out and make a movie. For the first time, we can represent ourselves. We can tell our own stories, and to be seen for who we are now, not the victims of the past, I think is tremendously exciting. That's where my work lies.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we're really pleased to welcome back to the set of The Verdict Terri White. She is the Commissioner of the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. She did her undergraduate and master's work at the University of Oklahoma. She was appointed commissioner in 2007. She's the first woman to hold that position, and she's the first woman to be Oklahoma's Secretary of Health. She is the CEO, if you will, of approximately 1,800 employees and about $400 million budget, quite an undertaking. This is her second appearance on The Verdict with us. We're sure glad you'd come back and tell us what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me back.
Sounds like you guys have been busy over at your office.
We are a little busy. As Kent mentioned in the intro, there's been a lot of attention, unfortunately for tragic reasons, on mental health and substance abuse issues over the last several months. It's really unfortunate. It takes a tragedy for us to start talking about these issues.
Right. Well, and nationally, the debate in the national media, and it seems like out of Washington, seems to gravitate toward the issue of gun control and how do we keep guns out of the hands of people who might do things like this. And it seems to not address what I think might be the principal problem, and that is how we're underfunding mental health in this country.
Yeah, I think the crux of a lot of our issues are mental health and substance abuse issues, whether we want to see decrease in tragic incidents like we talked about, if we want to see a decrease in the number of children in the foster care system, if we want to see a decrease of the number of people in the criminal justice system, if we want to see families staying together, if we want good economic development, we've got to have good brain health. And the fact is, that's mental health and addiction.
When did we start transitioning away from institutionalizing those with mental health issues and moving mental health issue people into the mainstream?
So it was in the 60s. There was a real movement. It actually started under President Kennedy. The Community Mental Health Act was created. And the theory is absolutely correct. We have gotten to the point in time, particularly now, with the advancements we have in medications, what we know about brain science, what's emerging every day, where people can lead full and productive lives. Just like someone with diabetes who lives in the community. They hold down jobs. They run organizations. They raise families. They just have a disease of the pancreas where the chemicals aren't working correctly. The same is true now with mental illness and addiction. It's a disease of the brain where the chemicals aren't working correctly. But if we can get people to the proper care, they can lead full and productive lives. People don't have to spend their lives in the hospital, if you will, the same way they don't with diabetes.
Kent mentioned you have a budget of $400 million. You have about 1,800 employees. And kind of divide up the 1,800 employees. What do those people do? What do they do on a daily basis?
And then I'll talk a little bit about our private network, because most of our system is actually delivers services through a private nonprofit network. We only have a few state-operated facilities left. Most of our 1,800 employees are nurses, doctors, and direct care patient assistants. We actually have one of the smallest administrative costs. In fact, we have the smallest administrative cost of any state agency in Oklahoma. Only 2.7% of our budget goes to administration. The rest, I know, it's actually sometimes a little frightening. I have employees who are working really hard because they're doing several jobs at once. But we've got basically people out in communities delivering services. And then we have a network of over 150 private nonprofit contractors in all the local communities well, not all the communities, unfortunately, in the state, but a majority of the communities who are out there saving lives, preparing to help people with mental health and substance abuse needs.
How big of a problem is it that a person might not take the medicines that have been prescribed?
This is true, and it's funny when we talk about this a lot of times. This is true with any disease. If you think about people you might know, say, with high blood pressure, how many people don't take their high blood pressure medication that are supposed to? People do not like to take medication. It's just part of our culture for some reason, and the same is true with mental illness and addiction. We have a lot of folks who sometimes don't take the medicine they need to take, and as a result experience some pretty difficult symptoms. But with medication and with the advancements we have in science, people can lead full and productive lives. I have no doubt that many of your viewers know people with severe mental illness who are leading full and productive lives, and they actually know people they don't even realize have severe mental illness because they're doing so well in their life.
How have there been developed methods to do better in encouraging patients to take their meds, or are we using the same system we did 50 years ago?
So some of the things that we have that have been major advancements are advancements in medication. Some of the older medications caused significant weight gain, sometimes caused muscle reactions that allowed people to look like they had a shuffle or that their muscles were kind of atrophied. So things like that, which of course people don't like to take medicine anyway, and when you have horrible side effects, then nobody really wants to take it. So advancements have helped a lot around the medication issue, but some of the other things that we find that are really exciting is better programming that really meets people's needs instead of sort of a one-size-fits-all. And really the amazing thing about mental health and substance abuse services, or the thing I think is so amazing about it, is you watch people get better. And as we see evidence-based programs put into place and we see people get better, that inspires staff to do an even better job, and you get to watch the process of recovery.
The title of your department is Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Are those clear delineations between those two roles?
That is a fantastic question. There's not a clear delineation, and what I mean by that is mental illness and addiction are both diseases of the brain. They're both diseases where either the chemicals aren't secreting correctly, aren't picked up correctly, or in the case of addiction, you have additional chemicals put into the brain that causes a different chemical reaction than normally would be there. So they often go hand in hand because it's the same organ in the body. Over half the people who struggle with one of the diseases has the other disease. And so we're really moving towards integrating care. That's actually one of the reasons care has gotten better over the last several decades, is because we treat both at the same time, or when we treat both. As we advance in that, people have much better outcomes and are much more successful in their treatment.
To what extent, aside from medication, is counseling or one-on-one treatment by a licensed professional effective in bringing better mental health?
Yeah, it's absolutely a critical component. One of the things that it's so hard.
Not dispensing medication, but dispensing talk or listening.
Absolutely. One of the things that we know is so important is that the outcomes for medication improve significantly when people get at least one additional service, whether that's an individual counseling service, a group counseling service, a peer service, which can be really important, talking to someone who's been through this, that's trained to help talk about that. Because medicine alone isn't the answer. It's a very important component, just like you wouldn't deprive someone of their insulin injection in the case of diabetes, as we were talking earlier. But people with diabetes also have to learn to manage their diet, to exercise, to do other things as well. The same is true with mental illness and addiction.
What kind of efforts are going on, or perhaps I should say, you anticipate will go on in this country or in Oklahoma to improve the delivery of mental health services and substance abuse services?
So there's actually two things. One's really exciting, and one everyone gets tired of talking about, but we have to talk about it in Oklahoma. So I'm going to talk about that one first.
Okay.
And that is funding. The fact is, this isn't a recent problem. Mental health and substance abuse services has experienced decades of underfunding. When you asked the question earlier about moving from institutional care to community care, there was a big promise made, both at the federal and state level, that the dollars were going to move from the institutions to the community. That actually didn't happen. And so people are going without services. On any given day in Oklahoma, 2/3 of the Oklahomans who need treatment for mental illness and addiction can't get the help they need because there's not enough services available. 2/3 of Oklahomans. It's really, when we talk about some of the tragedies, I've actually said before, sometimes I feel like we're rolling the dice every day because we have so many people struggling. We actually have people who've asked for help, who have made the step and have been brave enough to say, I need substance abuse treatment. They've been assessed and they need a residential inpatient bed, and every bed in our state is full. On any given day, it's 600 to 900 people on our waiting list. That includes pregnant women, that includes youth, so you've got parents desperately trying to find help for their kids. And we're funded 46 per capita in the nation. 46 per capita, and we have the second highest rate of mental illness in the nation, the highest rate of prescription drug abuse, but we have the 46th lowest funding.
What's our rate of tobacco abuse?
Oh, there are tremendous rates of tobacco abuse as well, although they're going down. We're making advancements in tobacco use, or prevention, which is really exciting.
Let me just interrupt just for a second. You said they go on a waiting list. Is that a waiting list where they'll be on there for a few hours, a few days,
Oh, no.
or?
It can be a few days and sometimes a few weeks. And so if you can imagine calling, say you're the mom or dad of a 15-year-old who desperately needs treatment, and we tell you you can be number 300 on the waiting list. Imagine how that feels.
Yeah.
And you're in a situation where adult, mom, dad, sister, brother, spouse, and we tell you you can be number 624. Do you think by the time we call back that person's still ready to go to treatment? Because if they could have stayed clean and sober, they wouldn't have needed this level of care. So a lot of times they're back in the throes of addiction, and that window of opportunity has been lost.
You got to strike while the iron is hot, don't you?
Absolutely.
Sometimes you'll hear someone say that that we're using our jails as mental health clinics. Is that an exaggeration?
No, in fact, I've said this several times. In Oklahoma, if you have a mental illness or addiction, you're more likely to see the inside of a police car, the inside of a jail cell, or the inside of a prison cell than you are to ever see the inside of a medical facility, which is absolutely the incorrect way to do it. Because most of the people, and so don't misunderstand me, there are some folks who need to be in prison that we are scared of, but most of the people who are incarcerated who have mental illness and addiction are incarcerated for nonviolent offenses. So as taxpayers, we're paying the cost for that room and board, and it would be so much less expensive if we simply provided the treatment, and by the way, infinitely more effective.
All right, Terri White is with us today. She's with the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, overlooking the entire state on some very important issues. We'll be right back with more.
They lift, grip, and bear pressure. They carry our state through every season. Hands that simply by doing their job, forge opportunity for nearly 350,000. These are the hands of Oklahoma's oil and natural gas industry, working sunup to sundown for our economy, our future, for every person who lives where these flags wave.
When you have something important to communicate, it becomes clear that there's a lot of competition for your audience's attention. So how can your message stand out and actually resonate with your audience? Legal Graphics has the answers. The team at Legal Graphics will work with you to plan, design, and even test your presentation to ensure your message will be heard and remembered. Call Legal Graphics today to schedule an appointment. The readiness is all.
we're talking about mental health and substance abuse with Terri White. Before the break, you talked about two different segments that are being funded. One's the ones that people don't necessarily like to talk about, and the other one's more exciting. Which one is that?
So I think the things that are more exciting right now is that the science around the brain is really exploding. We are learning more every day about how our brain actually works. We have national scientists across this country who are doing amazing work. They're actually doing things like a testing phase for a cocaine vaccination, a cocaine addiction vaccination. I mean, things that we wouldn't have thought of 25 years ago. It's just an amazing time to be in behavioral health. So while we're really low in funding and a lot of people aren't getting services, the good news is the funding we have, and hopefully the funding increases we'll see, are going for evidence-based programs that we know work and have proven outcomes.
Sometimes you hear people make the case for legalizing drugs that are currently illegal.
Yes.
How would that affect you and your staff?
So I think this is a really challenging argument that people need to understand, and actually your audience may be the perfect audience given kind of the legal flavor of what you talk about. What I say is legalization isn't the answer. When we look at how many people are struggling, for example, who are addicted to marijuana in our treatment system, we know that legalization isn't the answer. Now, what I will say is decriminalization, I do believe is the answer, which is different. It doesn't make the substance legal, but what it does is it says maybe prison isn't the answer. If that's the only issue going on, maybe we need to look at treatment. And I think that's a really important distinction.
Aren't we making some, at least baby step strides in that regard with the governor's push to try to open up the parole process a little bit for those who are nonviolent, certain types of offenses, and instead of and getting them out and getting them in treatment instead of leaving them locked up?
I think that the governor's leadership has been really instrumental. We have a program that we call Smart on Crime. It's 20 evidence-based treatment services that ought to be available in all major communities in Oklahoma and simply aren't. That she's been incredibly supportive of, in fact led the way to get the first funding for Smart on Crime in her first year of her administration, and has gotten additional funds to make sure that we are treating particularly a focus on women, because we know that when women are incarcerated, there's usually a child left at home, because a lot of the women who are incarcerated are single moms, and we know breaking that bond instead of helping that family heal means that that child's much more likely to end up in prison themselves as an adult. We've been incredibly successful with initiatives like that.
Like the rest of us, you've seen the national media and Washington in general trying to gravitate toward the gun control issue when they're trying to prohibit some of these tragedies from taking place in the future. What's your reaction when you see that sort of reaction coming from those entities?
So what we know is in Oklahoma, gun control is not a topic that is going to get a lot of support, but whatever venue we're in, whether gun control is being discussed or not discussed, if we really want to talk about preventing some of these tragedies, we have to address the mental health issue at the same time. We absolutely have to address the mental health issue. And the thing about it is there are some evidence-based programs that we can use very early on to help people be identified before they ever get to the crisis stage. Because that's really the key, is helping, for example, providing training to teachers to recognize signs and symptoms, early warning signs, so they can make a referral to get a young person help if it was the young person who might be causing the tragedy. As we know, some of them have been the school shootings have been young people. Also helping the general public understand basic signs of mental health, so that if they have a coworker or a family member or a friend, they might recognize and be able to help them call for help early on. Some of those things are incredibly important, and by the way, they cost very, very little.
Well, the domestic violence situation in the state of Oklahoma is alarming as well. People are watching this show, they think someone in their family might need some help. What should they do?
The first thing that I would say is call the 1-800 number, 1-800-522-3908. It's the Reach Out helpline. We can help people get hooked up with the services they need. So I think that's the first thing. If you actually are at a place where you think you might have an emergency. Now, if you have a real emergency, you call law enforcement and ask for help right then.
Call 911.
Call 911. But there's other things folks can do. There are support groups. There are family-based groups. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, for example, is an excellent resource for families who have a family member struggling with mental health and substance abuse issues. So there are lots of opportunities. Hopefully we'll be bringing a new program to the state this year. There's been a lot of talk on the School Safety and Security Task Force about trying to get funding for a program called Mental Health First Aid. It's actually a term of art, kind of basic first aid skills, if you think about it, around mental health issues. How to recognize something, how to help call for help, some of those basic things that are they're for lay people. They're not for people in the behavioral health field who kind of already know this. It's for all the general public, and those are some things your viewers can get interested in and it can make a difference.
we have talked over and over on this show about why Oklahoma incarcerates more women than anybody else, any other state. I suspect that a good portion of the women we do incarcerate could use services either in mental health or substance abuse.
Yes.
And how do we get them into those services instead of behind bars?
Yeah, your suspicions are actually right on. Not only do we incarcerate more women per capita than other states, but when you look at the women we do incarcerate, we have a higher rate of women with mental illness behind bars than almost any other state. There is clearly a link between not treating the mental health and substance abuse issues and women ending up in prison, and the vast majority of them are there, again, for nonviolent offenses. So what we have to do is we have to, and again, it's not a popular answer sometimes because we have a tight budget in our state. We have to create more opportunities for treatment. Instead of spending between $19,000 and $23,000 a year per person to incarcerate a female, we could do a program like drug court for only $5,000 a year. So you can see a huge savings to the taxpayer already, which, by the way, is significantly more effective. 5 years after graduation, someone from drug court has been rearrested less than 25% of the time. A person who has served their full prison sentence for the same crimes, we compare the same crimes, 5 years later, they've been rearrested over 50% of the time. It's by far more effective and significantly less expensive, but every drug court slot in our state right now is full.
Yeah, we've had enough time utilizing drug court to be able to measure its effectiveness.
Oh yeah, we have over 10
the
years.
results are pretty encouraging.
So here's the thing. While we know we have huge gaps in Oklahoma, some of the biggest gaps in the nation of people not getting services, one of the things we can be really proud of is the services for folks who do get them, we are a national leader in. This is something we can be proud of in Oklahoma. We actually have staff presenting at the National Drug Court Conference in a few weeks because Oklahoma's drug court programs, the way our judges, the way our district attorneys, the way our defense attorneys and those treatment providers have implemented it, we have incredible outcomes. The same is true for other programs as well.
A successful outcome in drug court is good for the person going through drug court, but it's good for the family, it's good for the kids that may be affected,
absolutely,
and the community
it's
in
good
general.
for employers. One of the major things about our success with drug court, not only are people staying drug and alcohol free and crime free, we have huge increases in employment. It's a great it's a great thing for economic development, but here's the other person it's really good for. It's really good for the neighbor. And I say this a lot to try to get people to think about this. If my next door neighbor either was going to prison for a drug crime or drug court, as a taxpayer, it will cost me less if they go to drug court, but more importantly, they're less likely to ever reoffend. So if I have to make the choice for my neighbor, I want them in drug court because I know that I'm less likely to ever have to experience anything negative with them then.
We just have about a minute left.
Sure.
What are the top 2 or 3 substances in Oklahoma
That's a great
that
question.
our citizens abuse?
One of the things we often forget when we talk about substance abuse issue is the number one issue still facing our citizens is alcohol. 40% of the people we serve, of all the drugs of choice, identify alcohol as their number one issue. It's also usually the thing that youth experiment with the most and first. Very rarely do you hear someone that starts their addiction career starting out with methamphetamine, although methamphetamine, marijuana, alcohol being number one, and prescription drugs, which is one of the fastest growing areas of abuse in our state because people somehow think medicine might be safer. Those are the top drugs, but alcohol is still up there at the top, and that's something we've got to think about.
Terri, good luck in the budgetary process.
Thank you.
We'll cross our fingers that they're kind to you at the
Thank you
legislature.
very much.
Yeah, come back and see us.
Appreciate
Terri
it.
White doing great work with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Appreciate you coming on. Kent and I'll have a final word when we get back.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
All children deserve a life of hope and love. but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
We are a very conservative family, and we believe in old-fashioned family values. We have a loving home there, and we love kids, and we have 5, 6 of our own. And but I had no idea we were going to go into adoption, but it's been very gratifying.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Terri White does such a good job of communicating her role with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse.
Yes, we need to schedule another show along the topic that you suggested both at the break and on the air about perhaps getting some folks in here to talk about what can be done as preventative mental health measures to hopefully avoid some of these tragedies, identify them in advance and get them taken care of, and maybe we won't have these incidents to talk about. That'd be a good show.
Yeah, we have website information where you can get a hold of Terri and her staff. It's ok.gov/ODMHSAS. Let me give that again. ok.gov/ODMHSAS. More information about Terri White and the services of the Department of Mental Health. Yeah. Well, we appreciate you joining us on The Verdict, and I hope you enjoyed Terri's visit as much as we did. I think there's so many things going on, Kent, in this area, and I feel like we're well served having her and her department.
Indeed,
front.
They're working hard and trying to be efficient, but also effective, and able to do both.
Yeah, let's go to our website. theverdict.tv is where you can talk about a show you'd like to see on an upcoming edition, or a guest you'd like us to see us visit with. That's going to do it for today's show. Our thanks to Terri White and her staff, and we appreciate you for joining us on today's edition of The Verdict.